Everything changed on a rainy evening outside my house in Oklahoma City. I was coming home from work, wipers dragging across the windshield, thinking about nothing important. It had been a long shift, the kind that leaves your shoulders tight and your mind empty. I turned into my driveway and saw a figure standing on the porch through the rain. At first, I thought someone had the wrong address. Then I recognized her. Emily. She was holding a baby carrier in both hands, soaked hair stuck to her cheeks, staring at my front door like she still had the right to open it. She looked thinner than I remembered, tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. The porch light caught tears running down her face. I killed the engine and sat there for a second with both hands on the steering wheel. I had not seen her in almost 2 years. Not since the day she disappeared from the apartment we shared. Not since the silence that followed all the excuses I had made for her. No goodbye. No explanation worth hearing. Just absence. I stepped out into the rain and shut the truck door. She turned when she heard it. Her eyes met mine, and whatever speech she had practiced seemed to fall apart. The baby inside the carrier made a soft sound, then settled again. "Daniel," she whispered. Hearing my name in her voice after all that time felt strange, like hearing an old song tied to a bad season of life. I walked to the bottom of the porch steps and stopped there. I didn't move closer. She looked at me the way people look at a house after a fire, hoping something inside still survived. The rain tapped against the roof above us. Water ran off the gutters in steady streams. "Please," she said, "can we talk?" And standing there, watching the woman who once erased me from her life return with another man's child in her arms, I knew the old life was over for good. Before she came back carrying that child, there had been 3 ordinary years when I believed Emily and I were building something solid. We rented a small duplex on the south side of Oklahoma City, split the bills, argued over groceries, and spent Sundays pretending we were more organized than we really were. It was not glamorous, but it felt real. I worked steady hours, came home tired, and found comfort in the routine of another person moving through the same rooms. Emily could make even cheap dinners feel warm. She would stand barefoot in the kitchen, hair tied back, talking about coworkers I had never met as if I knew them all. She laughed easily then. She touched my arm when she passed me. We talked about getting married someday in the vague, confident way people do when they think time is endless. Looking back, the first changes were small enough to ignore. She started keeping her phone face down on the table. Then she began taking it into the bathroom. Messages lit up the screen late at night, and she would glance at them without opening them in front of me. If I asked who it was, she answered too quickly. Work became the explanation for everything. Late meetings, last-minute schedule changes, drinks with the team after a long day. She came home irritated, as if my presence itself was another task waiting for her. I blamed pressure, fatigue, money, anything that made more sense than betrayal. When I asked if something was wrong, she said I was imagining things. If I asked why she felt distant, she said I was needy. If I pointed out how little we talked anymore, she said adults got busy and I needed to grow up. So I adjusted. I cleaned more, cooked more, asked for less. I thought stability meant absorbing stress without complaint. I thought love sometimes looked like patience. There were still moments that fooled me. A movie on the couch, her head on my shoulder, a quick kiss before work. Enough to make me doubt my own instincts. Enough to keep me invested in a version of us that was already fading. Now, when I think of that time, I understand something I missed then. Relationships rarely collapse in one dramatic moment. Most of them weaken quietly, through habits, secrecy, and the slow withdrawal of honesty long before anyone says goodbye. Then she disappeared. There was no fight, no dramatic confession, no slammed door that announced the end of anything. I came home on a Thursday evening and found half the closet empty, her makeup drawer cleared out, and the coffee mug she always used missing from the rack. Small absences told the story before my mind was willing to accept it. Her toothbrush was gone. The framed picture from our trip to Dallas was gone. Even the blanket she kept folded on the couch had vanished. I called her 3 times before I finished walking through the apartment. Straight to voicemail. I sent messages that began calm and became shorter with each hour. "Are you okay? Call me. Where are you?" Nothing came back except the read receipts that appeared like insults on my screen. She was seeing every word and choosing silence. For the first week, I told myself there had to be some explanation bigger than what it looked like. Maybe a family emergency. Maybe fear. Maybe something had happened that she could not yet explain. I checked my phone in the middle of the night. I replayed every recent conversation, looking for clues I had missed. I blamed stress, depression, confusion, anything except the obvious truth. By the second week, excuses started to feel childish. Rent was due. Her side of the dresser stayed empty. Mutual friends answered carefully, which told me they knew more than they wanted to say. One of them mentioned seeing her car across town. Another said she was taking time to think. Nobody looked me in the eye when they spoke. That was when the pieces began locking together. The guarded phone, the late nights, the impatience, the sudden criticism of everything I did. She had not left in a moment of crisis. She had been leaving in stages for months while still eating dinner across from me. Once I understood that, grief changed shape. It stopped being confusion and became recognition. The relationship I mourned had already been ending while I was still trying to save it. I had been living beside a decision already made. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. I sat alone in that apartment one night, the television on mute, and realized something cold but useful. Some betrayals hurt most not because they happened suddenly, but because they reveal how long you were the only person still participating in what you thought was love. After enough unanswered messages, something inside me went quiet. Not healed, not calm, just finished with begging for explanations from someone who had already chosen distance. I stopped checking my phone every 10 minutes. I stopped waking in the night to see whether she had finally written back. I stopped rehearsing speeches for conversations that were never going to happen. Silence became easier once I accepted it was permanent. The first real change was practical. I took a different route to work, so I would not pass the coffee shop where we used to meet on Saturdays. I canceled the streaming accounts she had set up in her name. I boxed the clothes she had left behind and stacked them in the hall closet. I sold the sectional couch we had bought together because every cushion still held the shape of old evenings I no longer wanted to revisit. I joined a gym near my job, not out of inspiration, but because empty hours after work had become dangerous. Idleness invites memory. I lifted badly at first, ran short distances, and came home sore enough to sleep. Pain with a purpose felt cleaner than pain without one. Week by week, routine replaced rumination. Friends invited me out. I said yes sometimes. I said no often. I learned that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. One is imposed, the other is chosen. That distinction mattered more than I expected. I also changed small habits nobody else would notice. I made the bed each morning, cooked real meals instead of eating from cartons, paid off a lingering credit card balance, read at night instead of scrolling through old photos. None of it looked dramatic from the outside. No grand reinvention, no speeches, no revenge. Just maintenance of a life that had nearly stalled. Inside, though, something fundamental had shifted. I no longer wanted her to understand what she had done. I no longer needed her regret to validate my hurt. The version of me waiting by the phone had become embarrassing even to myself. One evening I stood in the apartment after mopping the kitchen floor, windows open to warm air, and realized I had not thought about Emily for almost 3 straight hours. That small gap felt larger than any apology could have been. By the time months had passed, I was still carrying the damage, but I was no longer carrying hope. And once hope for the wrong thing dies, a person gets lighter in ways nobody else can see. I never asked mutual friends for updates, but news has a way of finding the person it can still wound. Someone mentioned Emily was living with a man named Tyler on the north side of Oklahoma City. Another said he drove a lifted truck, wore polished boots, and talked loudly about business plans that changed every month. I nodded as if it meant nothing and changed the subject. Weeks later, I heard Tyler had quit his job with no notice. Then someone else said he was talking about moving to Florida because opportunities were better there. The story arrived in fragments, always casual, always offered with that tone people use when they pretend gossip is concern. I never encouraged it. I simply listened and let the details settle where they wanted. Then came the next piece. Tyler had gone south alone first. Emily was supposed to join him later. Rent had become uncertain. Their names were attached to late payments. Her old workplace had cut her hours because she kept missing shifts. Every update sounded less like romance and more like logistics collapsing under strain. Months passed before I heard she was pregnant. Nobody knew whether Tyler was still around. only that his truck had not been seen in the apartment lot for weeks. Someone claimed he was working construction near the coast. Someone else said he was living with cousins and sending promises instead of money. The exact version changed depending on who was speaking, but the pattern stayed the same. I never commented. There was nothing useful to say. Judgment would have been cheap, sympathy dishonest. So I treated each new fact the way I would treat weather reports from another county. Noted, then set aside. Still, privately, I recognized something sobering. The life she chose after leaving me did not collapse because fate punished betrayal. It collapsed because fantasy always struggles when rent is due, jobs are unstable, and character is tested by ordinary pressure. Real life asks for discipline more than excitement. One evening, after hearing yet another rumor, I stood at my kitchen sink washing a plate and realized I felt no triumph at all, only distance. Her story had once been the center of my pain. Now it sounded like background noise from a house down the street, loud enough to hear, too far away to matter. A full year passed before Emily's name reached into my life again. By then I had a better position with a commercial contractor, steadier money, and the kind of routine that no longer needed repairing. I was dating Sarah, a nurse with a dry sense of humor and none of the chaos I once mistook for passion. We were quietly planning a move across Oklahoma City to a newer place closer to both our jobs. Life had become ordinary again, and ordinary felt valuable. The first text came from a number I did not recognize. "Hey, it's Emily. Please answer." I stared at it, then deleted it. 10 minutes later, another arrived from a different number. "I just need to talk. It's important." I blocked that one too. Over the next week, 3 more messages came in the same pattern. Unknown number. Brief apology. Request to meet. No explanation. No acknowledgement of 2 years of silence. Just urgency, as if need itself should reopen access. Then my sister called. She sounded irritated before she even said hello. Emily had contacted her through social media, asking for my address, my schedule, whether I was seeing anyone, whether I still lived alone. My sister told her nothing and then called me immediately. I thanked her and changed the subject, but the old anger stirred for the first time in months. A few days later, I walked out of my office trailer and found a folded note tucked beneath the wiper blade on my truck. I recognized the handwriting before I opened it. "Please hear me out. I have nowhere else to go." I stood in the parking lot holding that paper while forklifts moved in the distance and men shouted measurements across the site. Real work continued all around me. The note felt like something dragged in from another lifetime. That evening, Sarah asked why I seemed distracted. I told her the truth, calmly and without embellishment. She listened, nodded once, and said, "Then decide what level of contact protects your peace." It was such a simple sentence that it embarrassed me. Healthy people often make clarity sound easy. I threw the note away and thought that would be the end of it. But later, driving home through steady rain, I turned onto my street and saw a familiar figure standing on my porch with a baby carrier at her feet, waiting beneath the light like time had circled back for one last attempt. She stood under the porch light with rainwater dripping from the edge of her coat, one hand on the baby carrier as if it might slide away without her. Up close, she looked older than 2 years should allow. Exhaustion had settled into her face, and whatever pride once sharpened her expression was gone. The child inside the carrier slept through the storm, wrapped in a faded blanket with cartoon stars. I stayed near the door, keys still in my hand. "Say what you came to say." Emily swallowed hard. "Tyler left before the baby was born." She spoke in short bursts, like someone reporting damage after a wreck. He had borrowed money from anyone who would lend it, then disappeared to Florida with promises to send for them later. No money ever came. Bills stacked up. Her apartment manager had posted warnings on the door. Her mother let her stay for a week, then told her not to come back with a baby and no plan. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. That sentence hung between us heavier than the rain. Not "I missed you," not "I was wrong," just need dressed as confession. She started crying again, shoulders shaking while trying not to wake the child. "You were the only man who ever treated me right." I had imagined many versions of seeing her again. Anger, vindication, questions answered at last. Instead, I felt something quieter, distance so complete it surprised me. The woman crying on my porch knew facts about my past, but she no longer belonged to my life. I asked if the baby needed formula or food. She nodded without looking up. I took out my wallet, counted enough cash for groceries and gas, and held it toward her. She hesitated before taking it. You need to go back to your mother, I said. Apologize if you have to. Ask for a week. Then find work, childcare, whatever comes next. But you can't come here. Her face tightened. So that's it. That ended a long time ago. She stared at me, as if waiting for softness. She remembered. What she found instead was finality. I picked up the carrier, set it carefully beside her in the dry part of the porch, then opened the storm door behind me. Take care of your son, Emily. It's a girl, she whispered. I nodded once. Then take care of your daughter. For a moment, neither of us moved. Rain tapped the railing. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went silent. Then she gathered the carrier, clutched the money in one fist, and walked back into the dark without another word. She texted twice more during the next month. The first message said she was sorry for everything. The second asked if we could meet somewhere public and talk like adults. I answered neither. Silence had taken years to learn, and I was not interested in unlearning it for someone who only respected boundaries after losing options. After that, the updates came the same way old ones had come, through other people who assumed history still made us connected. A former coworker told me Emily had moved back in with her mother on the edge of Oklahoma City. They fought often, but they were managing. Another friend said she enrolled in night classes at the community college, trying to finish credits she once abandoned. Someone else mentioned she had found part-time work at an elementary school as a teacher's aide. Each piece of news sounded less dramatic than the life she had chased before. No more grand plans. No more men with loud promises. Just buses, schedules, childcare, classes, and work. Ordinary burdens. Ordinary responsibilities. The same kind of life she once seemed eager to escape. I never mocked it. In truth, I hope she kept going. Consequences do enough damage without spectators cheering them on. Some people need collapse before they can recognize structure. Maybe she was finally learning that reliability matters more than excitement once a child depends on you. Mutual friends slowly stopped mentioning her name. At first, they tested the subject, waiting for bitterness or curiosity. When they got neither, the stories ended on their own. People only carry gossip where it is welcomed. I gave them nowhere to set it down. Meanwhile, Sarah and I kept building something quieter. We spent weekends packing boxes, comparing neighborhoods, arguing over paint colors in a way that ended with laughter instead of contempt. She never asked for details about Emily beyond what mattered. Mature people rarely need every chapter of a book they did not write. One afternoon, while loading dishes into crates for the move, I realized I had not heard anything about Emily in months. The silence felt natural this time, not empty. Her story was continuing somewhere else, with different stakes and different witnesses. Mine was continuing here. That may be the cleanest ending most people ever get. Not apology, not justice, not dramatic closure. Just distance becoming normal, until the person who once disrupted everything slowly becomes someone you no longer think to ask about. People expect a man in my position to feel triumph when the person who hurt him falls apart. They imagine some private satisfaction, a scoreboard finally corrected by time. I waited long enough to know that was never true for me. When I heard Emily had moved back with her mother, was working days and taking classes at night, I felt no joy. When someone mentioned Tyler had vanished for good and was rumored to be living somewhere near the coast in Florida, I felt no anger either. Those emotions require investment, and mine was gone. What remained was clarity. She had not come back to me because love returned. She had come back because hardship had introduced her to memory. She remembered a place where rent was paid on time, where dinner was cooked, where someone answered the phone, where steadiness existed without needing to be admired. She did not return to me as a man. She returned to the shelter of a season she once undervalued. That distinction mattered more than any apology could have. If I had confused her desperation for devotion, I would have reopened an old wound and called it compassion. Need can imitate affection when survival is involved. It says the right words because hunger learns quickly, but it cannot sustain honesty for long. I thought about that rainy porch often in the weeks after. Her face under the light. The sleeping child. The way she said I was the only man who had treated her right, as if decency were something she could recover by naming it. Maybe she believed it in that moment. Pain often produces sincere sentences. It does not always produce lasting change. Sarah once asked if I regretted turning Emily away. I told her no, and meant it. Helping someone once does not obligate you forever. Loving someone once does not require reopening the door each time their choices fail them. Mercy and access are not the same thing. Some nights I still considered how easily life can split. One decision, one betrayal, one rainy evening, and two futures stand side by side. In one, I mistake pity for purpose and step backward into damage. In the other, I close the door gently and continue forward. I chose the second path, not because I was hard, but because I had finally learned that protecting peace sometimes looks cold to people who only value rescue. A few months later, Sarah and I signed the lease on a new apartment in Oklahoma City. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, bright, and ours from the first day. We carried boxes up 2 flights of stairs, laughing at how much useless stuff 2 adults can accumulate when life is stable. I set a lamp in the corner of the living room and looked around at half-open cartons, paint-smelling walls, and sunlight across the floor. Nothing in that room had history attached to it. No arguments lived there. No silence had soaked into the furniture. No memories waited in drawers. It was just space, honest and empty, ready for whatever came next. That was when I understood something I should have learned years earlier. Some doors close not because revenge wins, not because someone loses, and not because pain disappears. They close because peace needs a boundary. I locked the new door that night, set the key on the counter, and never thought of the old porch again. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.